The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome everyone to NCEA's A Closer Look at the National Standards and Benchmarks for Effective Catholic Elementary and Secondary Schools Mission and Catholic Identity webinar. My name is Kate Reich and I am on hand to help with any technical questions about today's event. Before we begin the presentation, I hope you all have a copy of the standards that we're going to be discussed today handy. I am sending a link through the chat box for you to access those standards if you don't already have them available. I need to let you all know that all of your microphone connections with today's webinar have been muted. During the presentation, you may ask questions or provide comments for the presenter by using the chat and/or question functions located in the GoToWebinar panel on the right side of your screen. To use these functions, click on the chat or question bubble and then click into the blank box area and enter your question using your keyboard. Then click Send. The webinar presentation will run for 45 minutes or so, leaving some time at the end for the presenter to answer any questions that you have provided. You will be asked to complete a brief evaluation about this webinar later today, and your feedback is greatly appreciated. Lastly, this webinar is being recorded, and you will all receive a copy of the final recorded presentation, which we will email to you once the recorded file is available. This evening, I'm very happy to introduce Dr. Lorraine Ozar, who is the director of the Andrew M. Greeley Center for Catholic Education at Loyola University Chicago. She is today's webinar presenter, and I welcome Dr. Lorraine Ozar.
Thank you, Kate. I am delighted to be here. I am, as Kate said, I'm not getting my... There we go. I am the director of the Andrew M. Greeley Center for Catholic Education, and I've had the privilege of being one of the lead authors of the standards and benchmarks. In the spring, we did an overview of all the standards called Understanding the Standards, and now we're going to have a series of webinars that go a little bit deeper into each of the domains. So we're going to begin with the first domain, Mission and Catholic Identity. The purpose of this webinar is to go a little bit deeper into some of the core concepts and ideas that are in standards 1 through 4 and the benchmarks related to those standards. We want to look at what's in those a little bit more and what are the expectations they set for schools. In the process of this, I'll be talking about some of the criteria we would be using for assessing school performance on those benchmarks and having you consider how these standards and benchmarks can impact school improvement. While we are in the process of looking mostly at the standards and benchmarks, I'm going to say a few words about vocabulary. I will be mentioning the rubrics often. And then at the end, I'm going to talk a little bit about some new tools that are being made available very shortly for you to use the standards and benchmarks even more effectively in your schools. A word about the rubrics. I hope that you have all visited the Catholic School Standards Project website and know that in addition to finding the standards and benchmarks there, you will find 4 scale point rubrics for each of the benchmarks. And so when I talk about rubrics, those are the rubrics that I'm going to be referring to. All right, as you know, the standards have 4 domains. And we're beginning with Mission and Catholic Identity. These are school effectiveness standards, so they are asking what should be in place in excellent Catholic schools that are mission-driven, program effective, well-managed, and responsibly governed. And if you've heard me speak before, you know that part of my mantra in regard to these standards, and I think one of the most powerful things about them, is that the standards communicate the message that Catholic identity is all of this, that we need all these domains and we need to pay attention to what's in all these domains to be a sound and excellent Catholic school. Catholic identity needs to be in every part of us. So then you might ask, okay, then why do we have a domain separate that we call Mission and Catholic Identity if Mission and Catholic Identity is embedded everywhere? It's because it's so important that having a separate domain allows us to highlight and underscore the connection of Catholic schools to the person of Jesus Christ, embracing their role in evangelization, and the deep integration of Scripture, social teachings, and Catholic worldview that needs to be present in every dimension. So it's happening everywhere, but we want to highlight how important these particular pieces relating to the defining characteristics of Catholic schools, how important they are. I'm going to walk through each standard and highlight some of the core concepts and compelling expectations that are embedded in each of the benchmarks. So as Kate mentioned, we hope that you have a copy of standards 1 through 4 and the benchmarks in front of you, and I'm hoping you actually have a copy that you might be able to even take notes on if you want to. As I go through and highlight with a little more depth what you might be looking for, what might be present in your school, I hope that you will be thinking about what's striking you in terms of your own experience. So there might be some things where you say, yes, yes, we do that, we have that, that is part of what we are, it's alive and well. Or you might say you might hear something else and say, maybe we're not paying as much attention to that, or that isn't really the way we've been thinking about looking at that benchmark, and you could make a note so that you can go back and have richer and fuller conversations with others in your school. Okay, this benchmark is about, this standard is about having a mission statement that permeates everything and is absolutely squarely connected to Catholic identity. So the first benchmark, and I'm not going to be reading the benchmarks, so if you have them in front of you, you can see their exact wording. But the first benchmark is about ensuring, asking the leadership governance to ensure that the mission statement includes gospel values, Eucharist, faith formation, academic excellence, service. So right off the bat, when we see the mission statement, we know very clearly this is a Catholic school. The second benchmark talks about how the mission is a foundation and normative reference for everything. This is the yardstick against which school practice should be measured. Planning, budgeting, policies, curriculum, activities, recruitment, everything we do, we should be able to go back and say, and yes, we see the mission here. Yes, it's aligned to the mission. Or if we're going to do something new, is it aligned to the mission? Does it fit? This is a constant foundation and reference. Benchmark 3 is very, very important. When you look at the statement, it says that we call together our stakeholders, our community, to reflect on and renew the mission regularly, even annually. This is about evaluating effectiveness and relevance. It's not about getting together to wordsmith. This is an opportunity for the community to consult together to determine if the values, practices, audiences that the school seeks to serve stated in the mission are really being authentically represented. We can evaluate here the reach of the school's services and the interplay of stakeholders with the school. Is the mission real? That's what this is really calling us to. It's the expectation that we will, as a community, regularly, even yearly, take the time to intentionally see whether the mission and the lived experience in the school match. The fourth benchmark in this standard says the mission is public and visible. The mission is at the core of the school's existence, so it needs to be an organizational tool, an educational tool, a branding and marketing tool. We should find it, see it, have it be readily available in social media, on our website, publications, in our documents, in our classrooms, in the office. We should be able to bump into it early and often, which ties in to the last benchmark in this standard: everyone knows and understands. We would probably say, oh wow, that's a big expectation. But think of this as not about memorizing or reciting, but thinking about it as the mission being so much part of people's experience that it is on the tip of everyone's tongue, and it means something consistent, defining, and energizing. Now, some schools have translated the core of their mission into taglines: women and men for others, we believe what Jesus Christ believes, knowledge and faith in the service of the world. You may have one of your own. If you don't, it might be a way to really have the community see what we condense out of the heart of this living mission. In some schools, there are clear core values that are present and published. They may be in the mission, or they may be drawn from the mission. Goodness, knowledge, discipline, truth, compassion, competence. I'm trying to read my handwriting here of some of my notes. You know your core values. This is another way of expressing what's in the mission. Giving examples, taking opportunities to share stories and connect them directly to the mission. Can people describe and demonstrate a personal attachment to the manner in which the mission has affected their lives? Can they tell stories about the mission? So again, this benchmark is not about memorizing, it's about integrating and really making that something that is a powerful generator of a relationship to the core of the school. All right, quick, a mission check. Can you state yours? I know we can't have conversation here, which would be much more fun. But if I asked you right now if you could tell me your mission, could you do it? When was it last reviewed? When was the last time as a community you talked about your mission, about whether it's real and what is the fit between the mission and what's really happening? Where can you see it? If you closed your eyes right now, I don't know where you're sitting listening to this webinar, could you picture where you could see an instantiation of the mission? Is someone deliberately looking? Is it someone's job to keep saying, and what about mission, and what about mission? Or maybe it's everyone's job. What does it do for you? If you were going to stop, parent stops you in the hall right now and says, what does this mission do for you? What would you say? What would your students say? This is what Standard 1's about. Does your mission make your school community powerful in a single-minded purpose that means a lot to students, parents, faculty, staff, leaders, board? That purpose that embraces faith, Eucharist, service, academic rigor. That's what we have here. So I'm going to pause for a minute and ask if Kate's gotten any questions yet so far.
Hi, everyone. Quick question was, what about our diocesan Catholic school mission statement? How should that impact schools?
Oh, it should impact schools in the very same way. I think that a challenge, of course, and we're going to talk about how these things connect, would definitely be to see how the school's mission relates to the diocesan mission. And as we see ourselves not as isolated units, but as part of the larger church, I think that would be a really good conversation to have, and it might spark again some embellishment or additions, or it might in some way allow us to generate examples that take our mission and connect it to the larger diocesan mission.
Okay. And just another quick question is, should the diocesan stakeholders, parents, students, faculty, and staff know this as well, in addition to their own school mission statement?
Good thought. I hadn't been thinking in those terms, so I'm glad someone raised that. But yes, I think the short answer would certainly be yes. Again, we are part of the whole church. And so to see ourselves as our school as having a mission that fits with the mission of our church in our diocese, in our location, I think would be a very powerful thing to do.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lorraine.
Okay. All right, let's continue then and move to, and as I didn't move my last thing, we want the mission to permeate, penetrate, and empower. So let's move to Standard 2. This is one of my favorite standards. It's talking about an excellent Catholic school has rigorous academic religious studies and Catholic identity, integrating faith, life, and culture into everything. I call this the both and standard. Academic rigor in religious education and religious Catholic identity dimensions in all subjects. There's a lot here in this standard. The first benchmark, and in this standard there are 7 benchmarks we have. The first one looks like it's pretty straightforward: meet religious education standards and requirements. And in a way we've been talking about that. We're not isolated, we're not islands, we're part of a diocese, part of a church, part of networks. And if we want our religion curriculum to be excellent and rigorous, then we need to be paying attention to those bigger standards, just the way we do that in all of our academic courses. Benchmark 2 is about religion classes being integral to the academic program. This means that the school holds comparable expectations for religion courses, theology courses, religious education as it does for any other subject. Comparable expectations in rigor, in student engagement, academic weight, qualified teachers, sufficient class time for meaningful engagement, a budget for materials. To be following this benchmark means that religion is not the first class we cut for assemblies. It's not the alternative with PE or excluded from the GPA or allowing teachers with lesser credentials. It means that we see religion classes as important a part of our academic program as every other subject. Benchmark 3 is about qualified faculty, that the faculty have the credentials to teach religious education. But if you look at the whole statement of this benchmark, the last phrase I think is critically important. The faculty have the credentials in order to be able to provide effective religion curriculum and instruction. So this is not just about paper credentials. It's about teachers being able to present content correctly and confidently, to be gospel role models. This benchmark calls the schools to grow this dimension. We all know that even when we hire the most qualified teacher, teachers grow. That's what continuous improvement in learning is about. So the school, if you commit to qualified faculty, it means you're also committing to professional development to keep growing that, so that we would have professional learning communities for all of our faculty, including the religious education faculty. Opportunities for faculty to deepen knowledge and expertise and improve pedagogy in all subjects, including religious education, deliberately integrating developments in catechesis into professional development. So this is about having qualified faculty, because qualified faculty can lead to really innovative and excellent instruction. And I want to make a point here. If you were to look at the rubric, the 4-scale rubric for this benchmark, but for all of them, they all sort of push us in the direction of moving to greater integration, depth, consistency, fluency. Again, excellent teachers lead to excellent, innovative, and engaged teaching. So it's about teachers who have the credentials that help them and enable them to deliver powerful, engaged instruction. The 4th benchmark is about excellence, a commitment in the school to excellence in academic and intellectual formation in all subjects, religious education included. Again, this is the both-and standard. This benchmark holds us to a commitment to a trajectory of academic growth in all subjects, including religion. So we need to be asking about all of our curriculum, including religion. Are there learning outcomes? Are they in line with established norms? Do they set high expectations for academic excellence? Are the assessments in various forms demonstrating, asking students to demonstrate competency in communication, creativity, collaboration, and critical thinking? Are these learnings evidenced in the rubrics and grading policies in our classes and courses? Are faculty held to growth expectations to get better and better and better at the quality of learning that they draw out of and facilitate for students? Level 4 for this benchmark talks about a sustained commitment to academic excellence and innovative academic growth through all programs, integrating faith, culture, and life. So this is holding us to mighty high expectations, and we wouldn't want it any other way, I hope. Benchmark 2.5 is a terrific benchmark. It talks about faculty using the lenses of Scripture and Catholic intellectual tradition in all subjects to help students think critically and ethically about the world around them. This means that faculty have a fluency, or requires that faculty have a fluency and an affinity for Scripture and Catholic intellectual heritage, and that they can make that knowledge meaningful in the context of students' lives. They can connect the students to meaningful experiences, connecting the disciplines to Scripture and Catholic intellectual tradition. It means that faculty can use their subject areas, whatever the content, to demonstrate how to think critically and ethically about choices and consequences. And they can have students within the subject discover opportunities of ways to think critically and ethically about choices and consequences in ways that are age and developmentally appropriate, allowing for performance, discussion, projects. What's being called for here is that teachers give students opportunity to learn and practice moral, ethical thinking, values, discernment, application of the principles of social justice in all subjects. And this is, after all, what makes the Catholic school different from the great public school down the street. When I was the curriculum director of schools, we used to meet around curriculum and say, almost as our first question, all right, so how is this curriculum different from the very fine school that was down the street, public school? We need to be able to find a way to make sure that there is that difference. This just doesn't happen. Faculty development is needed, opportunities for faculty to learn and grow in their own knowledge, to have intentional discussions, to be coached, to set expectations related to this both-and integration. I'm going to give some examples a little bit more of this both-and because it is so powerful and I think challenging for us when I finish going through the benchmarks for this standard. So I'm going to come back to that. But I want to say a word here about vocabulary because we're talking about scripture and Catholic intellectual tradition. May not be the first vocabulary term that we all have as faculty in schools. We are the folks who are working on the standards and providing tools, a group of people sponsored by Catholic Higher Education Supporting Catholic Schools, CHESS, have been working on developing a set of guidelines for interpreting and scoring performance on the benchmarks, and I'll say more about that at the end of this webinar. Part of that is to develop a glossary which unpacks some of the key and perhaps trickier terminology found in the standards and benchmarks. So this glossary is going to be on the Catholic School Standards Project website, I hope by the end of October, certainly this fall. But for instance, in relation to Catholic intellectual tradition, if you and your school are talking about benchmark 2.5 and what it means and how it happens and how are we doing and how can we help each other do more, you would first want to be sure you're clear on what we're talking about. So if you were to go to this glossary when it's available, you would find a definition, and it's a little fuller on this website than I've condensed it here, but it's based on the work of Sister Monica Hellwig. And it talks about the fact that there are two aspects of Catholic intellectual tradition. One relates to classic works, so text, art, and architecture, music developments in science and technology that we want to cherish and hand on. But it also, and I think this is the piece that really fits for what we're talking about in terms of teachers doing both and, it's a mindset. It's a way of approaching learning that acknowledges that knowledge and understanding is for something. It's for wisdom. It's for living well. It's for building the good. Faith and reason do not conflict. Reasoning ultimately leads to wisdom. We learn in community. So when we say both and we want teachers to be using the lens of scripture and Catholic intellectual tradition, it doesn't mean we're trying to make every class a religion class. But it does mean that we have a mindset where we know that there is truth in learning and that part of that truth includes a relationship to the transcendent. So that we approach, in Catholic schools, we approach teaching and learning in a way that integrates the disciplines, connects to the meaning of human life and its relationship to the transcendent. And then it's with this mindset, when we have this mindset, it makes huge sense. In fact, it's essential to be asking moral ethical questions, to be engaging students in critical thinking, to examine the values underlying choices and consequences, including and especially gospel values. So it's one of my little soapboxes, but there's powerful depth here that's part of who we are as Catholics, and I'll come back to some examples in just a minute. Okay, so if we're going back to Standard 2, we have two more benchmarks. Benchmark 6 talks about Catholic culture and faith expressed through the arts. For mission to be alive, relevant, real, impactful, the school community needs to see it, feel it, hear it in beautiful ways. A way to start here with this benchmark would be to connect back with Standard 1. Review together your mission statement and clarify its distinctly Catholic character, and then find and create symbols so that you bump into them in subtle and beautiful ways all the time. And then finally, benchmark 2.7. This benchmark says that the theory and practice of the Church's social teachings are essential in the curriculum. Social justice and service are hallmarks of Catholic schools everywhere. This benchmark challenges Catholic schools to be intentional about teaching students about social teachings so that they can make their own explicit connections between the service they do and the grounding of that service in our Catholic faith. So the students not only do service, they can express why the service is part of being Catholic and how it embodies the Church's social teachings. This rubric, the rubric for this benchmark, and the new guidelines for interpreting it and scoring it offer a lot of examples of how to deepen school performance in this area, but it's a really important thing. So Standard 2 is about excellent and Catholic. That's what it is, the both and. Before I move to my examples, are there any questions about this so far, Kate?
Not so much a question, but someone articulated, within the, the Catholic intellectual tradition, specifically to the mindset to, have ideas or suggestions about how to work with students who may not be Catholic or may not even be Christian now that they're exposed to a religion class, and using that as an example of a way of establishing the mindset. Catholic intellectual tradition.
Yes, but is the statement that through the way you engage the non-Catholic students in religion, you help develop that mindset? Was that the statement?
The statement was ideas, suggestions as how to proceed with students who are not Catholic, perhaps not even Christian, and are now part of a Catholic high school and are in a religion class. And so that's, I think, this was this attendee's way of keeping that mindset intact.
Yes, and I think that we are always not trying to convert students to Catholicism, but I know that schools are always upfront about when you are part of a Catholic school, you do engage in religion classes. So the acknowledgement would be that there is perhaps a different set of descriptors for how that student in another religion would be relating to the transcendent. But the reality that relating to the transcendent is important is part of this mindset. So in religion class, there's a need to be learning about Catholic practices and traditions. Catholic religion classes. But part of what we're talking about here and what I think is so powerful about this both and standard is that we're saying in other classes, in the way we teach in other classes as well, we are not asking a non-Catholic student to assume or take on Catholic beliefs or practices, but we are acknowledging that in whatever we're teaching, to ask the question, what are the values that are underlying this action or this decision or this event? What are the implications? How does it fit with someone who believes this, with someone who believes that? Ought to be, and is a powerful part of what we do in Catholic schools and enriching to every student, whether they're Catholic or not.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for...
We can come back to that if we can have some more of that if we need to. Let me give you a couple examples of this both and. This is going to be very brief because we don't have very much time. But in this process, what we do is we start with what we know about good curriculum and academic rigor. So we know here are the elements of curriculum units that come out of well-designed, standards-based, backward design curriculum. So we're going to be paying attention to all those elements as we build our curriculum in every subject. But then we're going to apply some operating concepts and principles about how we are then going to say, and what do we add to the way we approach these and the way we teach them and the way we deal with them that acknowledges that we are in a school that does recognize the lenses of Scripture and Catholic intellectual tradition and our heritage. So these principles and concepts were developed by Sister Leanne Welsh and Susan Abeline for our Catholic identity process. Here they are. Include Catholic identity when possible and appropriate, but do not force. And I want to say this again. Both and is powerful, and we are expected to be doing that. We're called to be doing that. We're challenged, but we're not forcing subjects to be religion classes. Use Scripture in official church teachings when they're developmentally appropriate. Use Catholic values, practices, and behaviors when they clearly relate. Critically evaluate any website and other resources for Catholic identity infusion. And then create awareness so that students do embrace this Catholic worldview. It's what we're talking about: respect for human dignity, how to treat each other, how to assess actions and consequences. So more specifically, we're trying to make and find natural connections and relationships between what's educationally sound and elements of Catholic identity. So between those unit elements I mentioned before and values, practices, belief, social teaching, Scripture. You probably may be aware of what we had been calling the Common Core Catholic Identity Initiative. We have reframed that project to be more expansive so that we are not looking at the integration of Catholic identity only with the Common Core, but with all rigorous academic standards. So this is now reframed as the Catholic Identity Curriculum Integration. And the purpose of that project is to help, is to showcase and then to assist teachers and others in learning and getting better at developing both and curriculum. So again, it would be taking the elements of educationally sound and connecting them with those elements of Catholic identity. One of the units you may have seen on the website is a grade 4 unit. So I'm going to illustrate just briefly. In the description of the unit, students are going to explore people who make waves by following their beliefs to transform their world for the greater good. Well, as a both and unit, this unit has two powerful objectives. There are more, but there are two here. The first one comes right out of the standards. Compare and contrast using literature and informational texts. The other one focuses on including at least one text on the life of a saint or hero who was a wave maker acting on Catholic beliefs. So in addition to other heroes or persons, wave makers we might use, we could use these: Elizabeth Ann Seton, Joan of Arc, Dorothy Day. It's not forced, it's not making this religion, but it's acknowledging that some people who follow their beliefs are following Catholic beliefs, and we can acknowledge those and help students make those connections. In a 7th grade unit, it's about the Civil War, looking at the challenges faced by people living at the time of the Civil War and how Catholic faith can provide a foundation to inform their moral decisions. So again, two essential questions. How can our responses and challenges determine and form our character, and in what way does our faith influence these? And so there can be a variety of sources that include or might include Scripture and social teaching. So all of this is to say we're not forcing, but we're looking at our curriculum in every subject and asking, are there texts and other resources that relate to Catholic values, beliefs, and teachings that could fit here? Are there essential questions that we could ask that get at and help students consider the underlying values or presence of social justice? Are there assignments or assessments we could create that would ask students to integrate knowledge and understanding of the topic with gospel values as appropriate? Are there assessments, assignments, or activities that ask students to consider ethical, moral implications of the content? Are there assessments, assignments, activities that ask students to critique actions and decisions that might be contrary to Catholic values and beliefs? And then my last one that I didn't animate, are there ways we could structure the learning environment that intentionally asks students to connect to Catholic values? Because sometimes it's not about, the both and is not just about the content or the text or the materials, but it might be about the way we teach, the way we ask students to work together, the way we form our policies and procedures. Again, the point is to be making intentional connections that ask students to do this both and in a way that fits. Okay, so one example, think for a minute, write on your piece of paper if you can. Can you think of a way in which there is rigor in your religion classes and religious dimension in some other class? Just a quick thought. Might be a question to ask your faculties. Okay, I'm going to move through standards 3 and 4 so we don't run out of time, and then take all the questions that have mounted up as we go. Standard 3 is about student faith formation. So benchmark 3.1 indicates that every student is offered timely and regular opportunities to learn about and experience the nature and importance of prayer, Eucharist, and liturgy. This is about providing multifaceted approaches to be Catholic in accord with mission and helping students draw closer to God. We want them to articulate an understanding of Catholicism that is relevant to the lives of students and creating fresh and adaptive experiences that inspire students to encounter God. We want student input here, and if you look at the rubrics, you'll see that 4 exceeds talks exactly about that not only are students engaged, they're leading, they're shaping, they're creating. The student voice should be integral. We don't want just pro forma responses. When examined deeply, this benchmark calls for adults and children together to be developing understanding and experiences that generate a response to God. The rubrics and the new guidelines for interpreting the rubrics that we're developing offer examples, questions to ask, steps to take to make this benchmark a greater lived reality. Benchmark 3.2 talks about every student is offered timely, irregular, and age-appropriate opportunities to reflect on life experiences and faith through retreats and other spiritual experiences. This is about the school committing time, space, funds, people to provide students with meaningful and joyful encounters with God within the school schedule. This is our opportunity to demonstrate the value of spiritual reflection as a timeless life skill, central to our students' achievement. It's an opportunity for schools to highlight their traditions, to discover methods and practices that reflect the deeper spiritual heritage of your institution. The thing I think are just exciting and lovely about the benchmarks for this standard and the following one is when we look at them reflectively and deeply, they're calling us not just to have more of this and more of that, but to explore how having this mindset also of reflection in your spiritual life is really critical to who we are, and so enriching of our schools and building of community. The third benchmark talks about every student participating in Christian service programs to promote the lived reality of action in service of social justice. It's about creating a coordinated process for service that requires that all students participate, harnessing the students' natural desire to connect with the wider world and demonstrate the central tenets of the school's mission by living their faith with others and for others as Jesus taught. Not just doing service, but understanding why and expressing that. As we move from level 3, fully meets, to level 4, exceeds in the rubrics, we look at how involved are students. Are they collaborating in selecting the charities we might work with? Are they involved in planning? Are they engaged in coordinating responsibilities? Do they have time for reflection? Are adults reflecting with them? Again, this benchmark is setting forth, calling us to providing opportunities to initiate conversations with students about the mission of the school and ways to express it in service, and in keeping with the understanding of the Church's social teachings and gospel values. It's a huge opportunity that it calls us to, as well as an expectation. Benchmark 4 talks about every student experiences role models of faith and service for social justice among administrators, faculty, and staff. This benchmark looks to guarantee the community in community service. To quote Kristen Melly from Boston College, there is lack of authenticity to school-wide service if it only calls upon students and some teachers and parents to act. This benchmark necessitates the lived reality of Standard 4 that we're coming to, where administrators, faculty, and staff feel comfortable, encouraged, and supported to share and deepen their faith together, which also needs tools and time to build relationships. So this is about students and adults in the school together deepening their faith through service. Okay, Standard 3. Is student prayer joyful in your school? Is it real, communal, engaging, understood, cherished? More for conversation. Okay, Standard 4. The final standard in Mission and Catholic Identity domain, and this is about adult faith formation. Benchmark 1 indicates that the leadership team provides retreats and other spiritual experiences for faculty and staff on a regular and timely basis. Again, what this is calling us to is that the school commits time, space, funds, energy to the ongoing faith formation of faculty and staff. It rests deeply on the conviction that enriching the spirituality of the faculty will strengthen the Catholic identity of the school. As faculty are more confident and comfortable with their own spirituality, they can more fully engage with students in the students' faith formation. Benchmark 4.2. This calls the school, the leadership team, and the faculty to assist parents in their role as primary educators of faith. This is about developing a culture that recognizes and supports the centrality of parents in their children's faith life and development, and actively finds ways to help them, which again means time, space, resources, people, providing opportunities for parents to grow in their own understanding of and comfort with their own faith and spirituality, providing qualified individuals that can help, providing opportunities for parents to be part of shaping these programs and engaging in leadership. And I suppose providing them with an easy button for ideas, materials, examples, conversations with other parents and faculty, welcome into this process. So this is, again, not a pro forma. It's about a culture, a mindset, an expectation that if parents and their faith life is deeper, that will enrich the school through the children, just as the faculty's deepened faith life enriches the school and enriches the students' growth in their own faith. Benchmark 4.3 calls us to collaborate with other institutions for parent growth and faith. So Catholic Charities, Catholic Higher Education, religious congregation-sponsored activities, and so on. This acknowledges that the schools can't do everything that would be helpful for parents alone. Parents who are engaged with the faith life and core values of the school can engage with their children and encourage them to engage, as I said. So parent input and feedback is important. A key issue here for schools, I think, is time and personnel. Who's doing this and when is it happening? But the standards are definitely saying it's critical and important and part of what we're called to have in place. And finally, we have 4.5 as well. 4.4, adults participate in Christian service for social justice. This really goes back to benchmark 3.4 that we just talked about. It looks to guarantee the community in community service, again, from the perspective of the adults, to develop authenticity to school-wide service when all in the community are involved. Administrators, faculty, and staff feel comfortable, encouraged, and supported to share and deepen their faith together. This includes preparation time for adults to understand the teachings of the church regarding social justice and the gospel call to action. It needs tools and time. Do you see that sort of pattern happening here? To build relationships, time to build relationships. And as with the students, this is not just about doing the service, but understanding why. Allowing that time, building that time in for faculty to do that reflection. So finally, in this domain, benchmark 4.5, every adult visibly supports the faith life of the school community. We can ask in this benchmark some of the usual questions. Do adults participate in school-wide prayer and liturgy and service? Do they pray together? We can also go deeper. Can students talk about how they see adults expressing their faith and supporting students as they express their own faith? Can students talk about an adult who helped them with their faith? Now, different people are going to be at different levels in regarding to this benchmark, as to with many, but everyone, all the adults in our buildings, must have at least a comfort level that faith and the expressions of faith belong in our school, are welcome in our school, are important and necessary for us to be who we say we are. So to have that happen, we need time to discuss what it means to support our own faith or support a child's faith, what it looks like in practice, and lots of opportunities for adults to express and experience support in this regard. This is an investment in mission and excellence, and it requires an investment of time and imagination. But again, the richer we all are in sharing these experiences, the richer and deeper our Catholic identity will be. Okay, resources, and then I'll take questions if we have time. All of the standards and benchmarks are on the Catholic School Standards Project website. You should know that. I'm sure you know that by now. When you look at that bar at the top, one of the bars is for assessment tools. So if we go to assessment tools, that's where you're going to find the benchmark rubrics if you haven't already. On the right-hand column, you can see for each standard, you click on that, you will have all the rubrics for the benchmarks in that standard. You can download it and use it. The benchmarks themselves look like this. The 4 scales. Level 3 is fully meets the benchmark, and then we have exceeds, partially meets, does not meet. And it also gives you possible sources of evidence. So if anything's been triggered as I've been talking, it'll help you sort of remember where you can go to look to see what's happening in your school and think about what more you would like to have happen. There are on that site also worksheets to work on those rubrics. This is a new worksheet which will be up on the website within a week, I believe. It's a new expanded process that Dr. Patricia Weitzel O'Neill at Boston College and I have developed. It's an 8-step process for helping teams within a school to work through a benchmark rubric in order to score the school, to be able to reflect, gather data, and score school performance using the rubric. It's a walking through piece, and we think it's going to be even more helpful than the first set of worksheets that you may already be familiar with. So it's a tool I want you to know about. This is also a tool that will be on the website, hopefully by the end of October. So you're among the first to be knowing about all of these. They're called Guidelines for Interpreting and Scoring the Benchmarks. I've been talking about them. I know you cannot read this, but what I want you to see is that for every benchmark, we are going to develop a several-page set of guidelines that goes deeper in talking about what does this benchmark indicate, cut to the chase for school performance. As a review team member, what would you look for? What evidence would you look for? What questions would you ask to see how well this benchmark is happening at your school? What are key differences between the levels? So what's really at the heart of the difference between level 3, level 4, level 2, level 1? What would you need to do to move from one level to the next? So if you're at level 1, what would be some good things to do to move to level 2? If you're at level 2, what might be good things to move to level 3, and so on? And then finally, refer you to some words in the glossary. Okay, I want to thank the people who are leading the drafting of the guidelines for Mission and Catholic Identity. You see them there on your screen. Town Kiley from Marquette, Kristen Melly from Boston College, Sister Elaine Poitras from the Foundation for 21st Century Schools, and Aaron Barisano from the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. And we are going to be giving everyone else chances to put in their 2 cents once they're up and on the website.